Greetings, greetings, family. We are live. Sister Shanice in the house. Absolutely delighted to be here once again with another Sister Shanice show. We've got a great show lined up for you. Our guest is backstage. He's rearing to go. I'm just going to give you a few moments to come through the door, and then we are going to be taking it away and having a really interesting conversation with our guest today. So family, how are you? How have you been? Certainly hope that you've been enjoying the last few days wherever you are in the world. I hope it's all been going absolutely great for you. So as you know, every Wednesday, 8 p.m., we go live with the Sister Shanice Show. If you are new to the Sister Shanice Show, please do subscribe. When you come through the door, give us a thumbs up. Let us know where in the world you're watching us from as well. We are delighted to have you on board. Let me go across to YouTube, put that on mute, and just make sure that we're coming out live and direct via YouTube as well. So spread the word, family. Let everybody know that we are live and that they can actually now log on to the Sister Shanice Show. Right, just going to remind you of some of the guests that we've got coming up. So get your pens ready, get your diaries ready, and make a note of these really important dates for your diary. Dates for your diary. Okay, so let me just share screen so that you can see the slides that I'm going to be showing you in a very short while. Yeah, so welcome, family, as you come through the door. Here, let me share these slides with you because I really want you to know what we've got coming up for the Sister Shanice Show. So, as I said, first and foremost, welcome to the show. It's Wisdom Wednesday, every Wisdom Wednesday, live and direct, 8 p.m. GMT time. You can log on to the Sister Shanice Show. If you're new, welcome on board. This is a powerful independent platform where we bring you news and information and reviews and presentations and guest speakers, scholars, researchers, archaeologists, the works, political scientists, social sciences. This is a platform where we bring our Afrocentric perspective on world issues, be it scientific, political, environmental, whatever the perspective is, and so we have some great people from our community who bring their skills, their talents, and their knowledge to share with you, our audience. Last strong, family. If you miss Brother Jammers, Brother Edison, and Sister Baguette, last strong, oh my days, you missed a show and a half. So what I'd really like you to do, family, is to go to the website, go to my YouTube channel and watch this show for yourself. It will blow your mind. I mean, we are not even who we think we are. What am I talking about? You want to know what I'm talking about? Listen to this show. You think the person that you're looking at in the mirror is you. Take a listen to this show and you'll be thinking very differently. You are just looking at the body that houses you, but who is the real you? What are you really made up of? What is your purpose? What are your powers? Oh my gosh, this is a show that goes beyond the words, okay, the etymology of words. Today, we've got our brother Karanja Keita Carroll in the house. We're going to be talking from an Africana studies perspective. He's done a fantastic paper developing an Africological worldview, and that has been the basis for a huge mountain of work that our guest has been involved in. So really looking forward to us having a conversation with him today, because this work forms the framework, family, for a lot of the work that we're all doing from all these different perspectives. Next strong. We are honored to have in the house Mr. Joseph Patterson, who is the leader of Jamaica's third political party. We are going to hear from him what his vision is for Jamaica. I think all of us love Jamaica. We want to see Jamaica on top. Yeah, the two-party system that has been juggling in Jamaica up until now has not been able to deliver for the people. Will Joseph Patterson, if he wins, be the person to start delivering for Jamaica? And if he is, what is his vision? Watch the show Next Strong so we can hear from him live and direct. Then the following Strong, Wednesday the 28th of December, we have the King himself, King Joshua Maponga. Wow, wow, wow. Prolific public speaker, author, philosopher. He's a spiritual leader, social entrepreneur. We are honored, family, to be able to host him on this platform on the 28th of December. So make sure you don't miss that show. He's going to be reflecting on 2022 and giving us a vision for 2023. So make sure you're in the house for that one so you can catch that vision and run with it, family. For those of you who have bought my book, thank you so, so much. I am honored. And for those of you who may be hearing about the book for the first time, I've written a book called A Black King of Anglo-Saxon England. And I would be delighted if you were to get that book, because why? It makes a fantastic gift for your young people. It's talking about the history, the hidden history of Africans here in England. Okay, not many people are aware of the fact that we as Africans once populated England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. Not many people are aware that our people as Africans were once the rulers and the majority population of Europe and England as well. And so my book actually goes into telling you about just one of many African kings that ruled England. I went to school, college, and university in England and didn't know anything and didn't learn anything about the Black kings and kings, queens who were rulers over Britain. So this is going to make very interesting reading for you and your young people. So do make sure that with the festive season coming up, you include this book in their gifts. Amongst their gifts, you can get it from Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk. So make this your festive gift. It's educational, informative. It's going to be inspirational to the young people. I set assignments and project works in there for them to do. I will be encouraging them to think of what their career and their occupation is going to be so that they can be contributing towards the growth and development of our nation. So family, great seasonal gift for your loved ones. So thank you so much for viewing that with me. Let me stop sharing screen and go back to the studio, because I have backstage who I'm going to be bringing on now, none other than our brother, Dr. Karanja Keita Carroll. Welcome, welcome.
Good evening for you. Good day for all. I'm here.
We are absolutely delighted to have you on board. Wow. And, you have been so busy. You've got so much work under your belt. I know you're going to be sharing a lot of that with us today. And we're looking forward to this journey this evening of learning from you as we go. And what a resume you have. So family, if you are not familiar with our brother Karanja Keita Carroll, you certainly will be by the end of the show today. So the family's coming through the door. Spread the word, let everybody know that we are now live, because we are ready to take the show on the road. So how are you today, Dr. Karanja?
I am tired, but happy to be here, happy to chat with you and build and share a little bit of knowledge that I've gained around African-centered approaches to research and understanding reality.
Oh, we are delighted to have you here. We'll wake you up, won't we, family? We'll wake you up. So, family, as you come through the door, let us know that you're there. Remember, you know how we do it. If you've got, questions and, any information that you'd like our brother to answer, comments, views, you put them in the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat as we go through the conversations today, and I will be, bringing in some of your views and comments later in the show. So let's see who we got in the house. Hey, we've got our sister Verna Duncan in the house. Welcome, Verna, from Phenomenal Women, watching us from the UK. I know you've had snow and ice over there. I certainly hope that the weather is a lot better than it has been. We've got Sister Teresa in the house. Oh, she said excited for this talk. Hello, all. Welcome, welcome. Where in the world are you viewing us from, Teresa? We've got Deborah in the house sending blessings out to us. Yes. Oh, yeah, Teresa's watching us from Queens in New York City. Welcome, welcome. We've got Go Travel Abroad, Sister Baguette in the house, rising up the family from Nicaragua. Sister Baguette is the author of the book, The Black Woman Wound. Google it. Get it on Amazon. It's a deeply insightful book, especially for the women who feel that, they've inherited some of the generational hurts and traumas that many, many women actually suffer. And men, if you feel you need to understand your women more, get that book. Sister Baguette, rise you up for the works that you're doing. And yes, it's Wisdom Wednesday. Good to have you in the house. Yes, Itana from Iceland, UK. Sorry to laugh. I know it's really bad weather out there, but welcome, Sister Itana, beautiful Sister Itana. Sister Afrijabo, watching us from sunny Ghana. Welcome, welcome. Family, as you come through the door, just drop us a note. Let us know where in the world. Hey, we've got Zachary from Chicago, Illinois in the house. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, let us know. Hey, did I see Jamaica Drum Corps in the house? Yeah, man, the Jamaica Drum Corps in the house. Welcome. Oh, our global family is coming through the door. I don't know this sex one. Let's just block that user right now. Okay. So yeah, welcome, family. It's great. It's great. Sister Baguette is saying he is the husband in my heart. Dua King Maponga. Yes. Yeah, we do love our brother King Maponga indeed. Yes, yes. The book. Thank you, Sister Verna. An absolute must buy. Yeah, please do get the book. Share the link. You'll absolutely enjoy it. Well, today, family, as I've promised, we've got another very deeply insightful show lined up for you today. This is a brother who has an enormous amount of experience and knowledge, and he's going to be sharing that knowledge with us today. He's got let me ask him to tell him about it in just a little while. But first of all, let's welcome our brother to the Sister Shanice Show platform. He has a PhD in African American Studies. He got that at Temple University. His dissertation title was The Influence of Sheikh Anta Diop's Two-Cradle Theory on Africana Academic Discourse, Implications for Africana Studies. And I'm going to start right there. To ask our brother to tell us and give us a bit of an insight into that dissertation, because wow, that sounds so interesting.
All right. Wow. So I earned my master's and my PhD from Temple University in the Department of African American Studies, also known as the Department of Africology. And that's the first PhD granting program for Africana, African American Studies within the United States. And I came there with interest around Sheikh Anta Diop, honestly. And, when I was an undergraduate, I started reading Diop's English translated work. It was actually Diop's work that really got me interested in Africana studies. So when I got to graduate school, this is where I was trying to go. I was interested in Diop's work because of his clarity on questions of gender and women within African history and culture. And for me, that was then connected to the two-cradle theory. The two-cradle theory pretty much argues that large cultural groups of people, we're talking about African people, European people, in an area, in a third section, that Diop refers to as a zone of confluence. That these groups of people react to their environment, and they react to their environment as it relates to family structure, as it relates to the main mode of existence, as it relates to just the daily life. So Diop made the argument that within Africa we found this matriarchal, matrifocal family structure that was based upon agricultural living off of the land. You had a strong relationship with the land and you respected the land. On the other hand, you had this northern cradle, which primarily referred to Europe, Northern Asia, where you had this group of people that had to move because the land wasn't giving them what they needed in order to survive. They were nomadic people, and because of this nomadic lifestyle and being and living in an environment that was against them, they developed this very like conflictual controlling mentality as it relates to the environment and as it relates to other people. Out of this, you get notions of sexism and patriarchy developed directly out of the northern cradle. Diop argued that those cradles met within the zone of confluence where you have this overlap. So that basic theory um, influenced people within the field of psychology, people within the field of political science, people within the field of history, philosophy, so forth and so on. And there were Africans who were in the diaspora, the English-speaking diaspora specifically, who used that work to develop their own approaches to things. So everything that I had talked about in regards to the African worldview was actually rooted in, at the very foundation, Diop's two cradle theory, because it's out of that that we then develop unique ontologies, axiologies, epistemologies, etc. The work of Jacob Carruthers, trained as a political scientist. The work of wow, now I'm slipping on this, but the work of Naim Akbar, Joseph Baldwin, Linda James Myers, these were all trained psychologists. All of these people, took Diop's work and built onto it. And my dissertation tried to bring all of that together and say, look, this is the two cradle theory, and this is then how it impacts Africana academic discourse within these different areas of Black studies. So it's just foundational for my work, period. And, folks in the chat are lighting it up. Indeed, Diop talks about this work in Civilization of Barbarism. Book is published in English, 1991. This is the last piece that we have of Diop. And it culminates all of his work. I consider myself to be a Diopian scholar. I'm familiar with all of Diop's English translated work. I know some of the two cradle theory arguments that were published in French, but the English translated work is my specialty, and how he's impacted work within the diaspora. Is the English speaking diaspora is where my roots are.
Okay, just take myself off mute there. Thank you so much for that introduction, and let's rise up the spirit of Cheikh Anta Diop, a phenomenal scholar who's spent a lifetime really doing so much work for us as a people. And now, here you are saying that you have based all of your scholarly work, on Diop's, two cradle theory, as the basis for your works as well, and you've named so many other people, and there's hundreds of thousands of us out there, I'm sure, who have been influenced by the works of Cheikh Anta Diop. And so, family, what does that tell us? It tells us that when you're walking in your purpose, when you're spending your time researching and doing the works that need to be done, you are impacting so many people around the world potentially without even realizing it. So thank you for that opening and for all of that credit that you've given there to Cheikh Anta Diop. And that's a new expression, a Diopian. I like that. On your CV, you talk about the teaching and research interest that you have. We've got here your interests include African-centered theory and methodology, African Black psychology, African-centered social theory, Africana philosophical thought, Africana sociology, Africana history, Africana Black studies disciplinary structure, intellectual history of Africana Black studies. A lot of Africana in front of what we often see history, disciplinary structures, social theory, philosophical theory. I wonder if you could tell us why it is important for us as a people, first of all, to be looking at, all of these schools of thought from a Africana perspective.
So, you know, I think when I talk about perspective with my students, perspective is connected to where you stand and how you see from where you stand. That's one way to think about perspective. Another way that I tell my students to think about perspective is your perspective gives you criteria for judging and evaluating things. And I'll tell them all the time, you do not look at an orange based upon the structure of an apple, because then the orange is going to look like it's deficient. It's going to look like it's not existing properly. So these ideas of a perspective are so important because it gives us not only it gives us a basis of what we should be thinking about as normalcy, but also gives us the right angle to look at things. And when I refer to things as a Africana perspective, I'm being specific and intentional. When I talk about things coming from an African perspective, I'm being intentional. I follow the school of thought laid down by Dr. John Henrik Clarke, who said that, like, when you refer to a people, you need to refer to them as it relates to land, history, and culture. And if we refer to people as it relates to land, history, and culture, we're concerned with who we are as African people and how our positioning as African people shapes our reality no matter where we are at. And when we use the term Africana, we're talking about an African diasporic, an African foundation that is rooted in the African continental experience, but is found as it manifests throughout the world. Because, again, John Henrik Clarke would say the only thing that separates a Jamaican from a Trinidadian from Afro-Cuban is connected to where that boat dropped them off at. Okay, the origin is most important, which is where the boat picked them up. The boat picked us all up in Africa and dropped us throughout the diaspora. And as we were dropped within the diaspora, we developed as African people within Cuba, within wherever. So the point of origin is the most important, and that's why I root this stuff within an Africana and an African perspective. So that's what I would say in regards to perspective and how I see it and how it functions.
Thank you so much for that intro to Africana Studies. So, family, if you're just joining us, we are interviewing and having a conversation with our brother, Dr. Karanja Keita Carroll. Yeah, today we're going to be bringing you some Africological teachings. He's going to be bringing it to us. We're bringing our University of Africological Teachings to our community. And yeah, family, this is a space that we've created where we're going to be learning together. And, we're delighted and honored that our brother, who is very experienced in this field, is actually sharing his studies with us as a people. So, we are developing here our knowledge and our insight into having an Africological worldview, which is a new way of thinking, a new framework, a new frame of reference for us, a new African paradigm. I mean, especially those of us in the UK who, with everything that we're given, it's from a Eurocentric perspective, whether we're looking at history, psychology, sociology, everything, it's all from a Eurocentric perspective. So, we want to get a better understanding of this concept of having an Africological perspective to everything that we do. And our brother here, as I said, has written numerous papers on this, and we'll get into some of that in a little while. You are also a lecturer in terms of your teaching experience, and you have lectured, wow, on so many departments across various universities. I wonder if you could just, by way of introduction, tell us a bit about your lecturing experience, please.
Yeah, I've been teaching in higher education since 2001. So This is like 21, going on 22 years. I taught at Temple University, where I finished my PhD. Taught at the State University of New York in New Paltz in upstate New York. Taught at Seton Hall in New Jersey. Taught at some community colleges between New York and New Jersey. And right now, I'm a lecturer of Black and Latino Studies at Baruch College, which is a part of the City University of New York. I love teaching, and I think seriously about what I do in the classroom. I think that it is a privilege to be able to, introduce people to what I introduced them to. It's really, for me, just trying to get them to rethink everything that they've been taught up until the time that they walk into my classes. And I usually work with, folks right out of high school. This within the last, well, 4 or 5 years, I've been teaching primarily a course around racism, like 2 to 3 sections of that class. And I'm getting, like I said, students who are coming directly out of high school. So it's really good to, like, introduce them to, a variety of perspectives on racism, so they can think about how they then can move through their academic careers conscious of what the heck is going on. In addition to that course, which I teach regularly, I teach classes on African religion and philosophy. I teach classes on Black political theory. I've I've been teaching for a while around African centered psychology. Again, African centered psychology is fundamentally connected to Diop's two cradle theory, fundamentally connected to the work on worldview. So, what I teach is connected to the work that I'm researching and interested in. And, um, maybe by the time we get out of here, or hopefully on another show, I will talk to you and your guests about my work around political prisoners, because that is what I teach about now, especially in my racism classes. And it's also connected to the writing and thinking and work that I'm trying to do at this moment. As you and I have talked about, and I've said repeatedly, like, this work on worldview and methodology is stuff that I started when I was getting right out of graduate school. So this is like 2006, 2007. And I've worked in that area for like 5 or 6 years, something like that. No, like 10 years, I should say. 10 years I was doing a whole bunch of stuff around the worldview framework, and that's the majority of my publications. But now I'm moving more towards work around US held political prisoners and the relationship between New Africans and uh, the prison industrial complex. I'm indeed very much familiar with the work of Amos Wilson. Amos Wilson is the type of African centered psychologist who was very clear on making the connection between intellectual scholarly work and information that is accessible to our people. And inspires Amos Wilson inspires a lot of the public work that I do, a lot of the public lectures that I do. It comes from that approach of, like, listen, we're in higher education, we might have PhDs, we might be teaching to whomever, but we have a responsibility to bring our knowledge to the community. As someone who's trained within Black Studies at its very origin was fundamentally about connecting the campus to the community. And I started that connection from the campus to the community by doing work in prisons, like teaching where folks are locked up. If there's a large amount of our people who are incarcerated, I was like, yo, I need to be there. I need to be trying to engage them. So back in 2001, I started doing workshops and lectures in correctional facilities in Pennsylvania. When I was teaching in upstate New York, I was doing lectures at some correctional facilities up there. I also have done some classes within a juvenile facility, and I've taught a college level class within a prison at Sullivan Correctional in upstate New York as well. So, like, making the connection between what I do in the classroom and where my people are at is extremely important. If it means that I need to do a talk in the prison, I'm there. If it means that I need to be at somebody's church, I'm there. If it means that I need to be on the Sister Shanice show, I'll be there, because it's essential for us to connect the work that we do with everyday African people. Like, the whole intellectual enterprise where you've got these scholars who are, on some other stuff, just talking to talk and is not connecting to the people, burns me up inside, because it's like, yo, you got a degree, you got access to A, B, C, and D. Why aren't you making your stuff available to the masses of people? Why are you talking to folks in a way that is, you know, um, um, just not even like hitting them and digesting them? And that's another one of the reasons why I've actually moved away from some of the stuff around the worldview framework, because it just gets too heady. Like, I'm working on ways to make it accessible, but I was just like, nah, I need to do something that's easily accessible to the masses of our people.
Thank you so much. Well, we're at the moment just digesting the works that you've been doing on the Africana worldview, because we recognize that we need to have our own worldview. We need to have our own perspectives and our own frameworks and our own way of seeing the world as Africans, because we have been so brainwashed to see everything through the eyes of the Europeans that we're lost in all of that. And so the African worldview, I think, gives us an opportunity to put ourselves at the center and at the forefront of all of the thoughts. We can bring in our own history on all of those different disciplines when we start looking at it from our worldview. So someone's mentioned in the chat about the Pythagorean theory and where that's come from. Now, if we're looking at the world through a Eurocentric worldview, you'll get one answer. But if you're looking at that from an African worldview, then we'll get a very different answer. And so that's why we need to see ourselves in the picture, especially in the UK and us, just like America as well. We're whitewashed out of the history, and a lot of our history is just hidden from us as well. So we're learning together and learning along the way, and we're encouraging and inspiring it through your work. You are encouraging and inspiring us to see the world, from our own perspective. You've mentioned some great scholars there. These are some of the scholars that are just reminding us as well that there is a world that, belong to us out there. It's not written in the Eurocentric educational curriculum, but it exists. And it's largely been hidden from us, but through their works, it opens up a whole new world. Brother, the Jamaican Junker was talking about the books, Civilization or Barbarism. He said it absolutely blew my mind. That's an African perspective book, and it just resonated with him. But and he said that he showed where the Pythagorean theorem and it continues, in the graphic shows where the Pythagorean theorem came from, and clearly showed who were Africans with black skin and locks, and who was Haribu or Hebrews. So yeah, I mean, we were all Africans by many different names. And so yeah, I know you did the works many, many moons ago, but it is as important today to us as it was back then. You talked about the racism, classes that you do, and racism, has disguised itself today to a large extent because it's not as blatant as it was, say, 20, 30, 40 years ago. So, racism has changed to some extent, has it not? This is our campus here. You're coming to the Sister Shanice University campus, and we're delighted to have you here. Please do share with us. Give us a bit of an insight as to the sort of information that you're giving your students today on racism, and maybe how it's likely to impact on them and their lives, or is it the history of racism that you touch on with them? I wonder if you could just share some of that with those of us on the campus today.
So the course that I teach is entitled "The Evolution and Expressions of Racism." I've also taught at other schools a course entitled Dimensions of Racism and another course called Race and Racism in U.S. History. But I've grounded those courses in a similar ways. Um, the first thing that I do is talk about the concept of race. I think many people have bought into the argument that race is a social construct, and I challenge that based upon the work of Sheikh Anta Diop. Okay, Sheikh Anta Diop in Civilization of Barbarism really is very clear that race is real. Okay, race is merely just a reaction to the environment that has led for groups to actually survive. And so for me, I'm like, listen, race is real, race exists, and if different races did not exist, humanity would not exist the way that it is existing today. Meaning that these first, African people who are migrating throughout the world are reacting to the environment physically. There's a physical reaction to the environment. That is why we have different levels of melanin. That's why we have different hair structures, nose structures, so forth and so on. So that's we deal with the concept of race from Diop's perspective, and the argument is that race is real. Race is merely the basis by which we're able to survive. Boom. From there, we then can move into what race became, because race became a whole bunch of other stuff when Europeans decided to travel and judge people based upon how they looked and created a hierarchy, so forth and so on. But for me, it's rooted in the work of Diop, okay? Because it's actually, Europeans who developed this approach to creating a hierarchy between groups of people. As I stated to you before, according to the two cradle theory, the European people, those folks within the Northern Cradle, had a conflictual relationship with their environment. They were about controlling the environment. And therefore, they brought that same approach to how they engaged with other people. And therefore, racism is a direct outgrowth of the Northern Cradle. It's a direct outgrowth of the European worldview. It's a direct outgrowth of normal and natural ways of being European. It's normalized within the culture to think that anyone can be racist, which is impossible. But the reality is that this thing is rooted in the realities of European people. So those arguments are like foundational to what I do in that class. And then from there, we look at, contemporary theories of racism and the contemporary approaches. I'm very much influenced by the work of Eduardo Bonilla Silva, a sociologist who argues, much like you said, that like the racism that we might have been accustomed to receiving is now much more subtle and is connected to the language that's used, the way that we say things, and the way that we make arguments that are clearly racist, but we do it in a way that doesn't sound quote unquote racist. It also so those ideas also, between Diop's work, between Bonilla Silva's work, also impacts my approach to also thinking about contemporary racism and my ability to critique the notions of post-racism and living in a post-racist society, because people saw Obama get elected years ago, and they're like, oh, racism in the United States is over. And it's like, nah, son, it has nothing to do with being over as much as it has to do with the fact that we can put people who look like you and me in positions of power, and they do the bidding of white supremacy. So that's not the change of racism. That's just putting somebody, who thinks the same way as these white supremacists. We put them in power, and they do that work. You can look at all of Obama's domestic and foreign policy issues, and you'll see that they're rooted in that same white supremacist framework. I'd argue that the one of the best things that Obama could have done was assist in the pardoning of Oscar Lopez Rivera, a former political prisoner. Other than that, Obama's not worth that much to me.
We hear you on that. Yes, in fact, he did more harm than good for us as Africans, especially on the continent. The number of FEMA camps that we now have all over Africa as a result of his presidency, it's very concerning for the future of Africa and the wars, that he stoked during his time in office. Again, very, very concerning. The impact of it is still being felt in the world today. Nothing to celebrate there for us at all.
Let me just the Jamaican Janko channel is on point in the fact that he didn't pardon Marcus Garvey. It's like, come on, there's so many people that he could have pardoned. He could have pardoned Leonard Peltier, another political prisoner. There's so many people he could have pardoned, and he didn't. I'm happy that he did, assist with getting Oscar Lopez Rivera out. But there's so much that he could have done. But we put our hope into somebody who looked like us, and we have to realize that the complexity of this thing is not merely just because you my skin, you my kin. It doesn't work like that. And again, this is why the worldview framework is so important, because if we understand the framework and thinking, we can realize that there's a lot of folks operating and moving through the world who look like you and me, and they are thinking just like the people who are oppressing us, just like the people who are trying to control how we think about freedom and even get to freedom. And we think that freedom is having Black elected officials. We think that freedom is having Black faces in high places, and that only leads to our further oppression under our own people. And you can look at Black elected officials in the United States from the late 60s up until present. Okay, a good portion of them are acting in the interest of the state against the people. And if we don't recognize this, we then fall victim to thinking that if we elect someone who looks like us, we have answers. And I mean, we can look at the current vice president, who is has not been about our people, who has been one who bumped up incarceration rates all throughout California. So it's like, nah, I can't buy that. And for me, it's about having a conceptual framework and being able to ask questions. And when you get the answers, they tell you how we need to operate.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'd all agree with you on that, my brother. We can't, simply because we see faces that look like ours in positions of power, make the assumption then that they're working in the interest of us or the people. And we can see that all across the continent of Africa today. We have people who look like us in positions of power, but look at the state of the country. Look at the conditions that our people are still living in. During a technological age when we should be advancing. I'm in the Gambia right now in West Africa, and most people haven't had any power, any electricity for the entire day in the area that Pan-African mindset. Not necessarily going to happen if we're simply relying on our leaders. And we was having a bit of a conversation on this on my radio show this morning, and I read a piece, that piece was talking about the importance of community activism, and was saying that is where the change is going to have to come from. We as a people are going to have to organize in our women's groups, our youth groups, our environmental groups, our political groups, our Pan-African groups. We are going to have to organize and agitate for change, and we are going to have to be the change that we want to see. We are going to have to be the activists who are actively involved in bringing about that change, because as you were saying, not all skin folk are kin folk. Just because they look like us and are holding powerful positions, they are simply maintaining the status quo, which is not to our advantage at all. So lots of comments coming through from the chat. Yes, the Jamaican Junker, he destroyed Libya. Yes, indeed. And Go Travel Abroad is saying, yes, that, these people suffer from CAIDS, culturally acquired identity deficiency syndrome. That is CAIDS, and Obama was one of them. Suffering from CAIDS. Yes, indeed. And Afrijamo continues to say something here. There's a lot of evidence in Jamaica that Most of us came from Ghana. Nanny of the Maroons on the 500 Jamaican dollar bill. Kojo, Donkonu, is made the same way as it is in Ghana. Yes, there are, and were Africans in Jamaica that came from Ghana and various other places from the continent, and also a large number of Africans who were transported from Europe to fill up Jamaica, Montserrat, and America as well. That is a part of the history that's largely covered up. But yes, there was also a large contingent of Africans who were the original people of Europe who were transported out of Europe to fill up the so-called New World and new colonies. So a lot of mixture that went on the plantation. But we're all Africans. We're all descendants of the original people. So you've written so many papers as well. I was talking about that a bit early, just mentioned that you are the author of so many publications. You talked about the publication that you did from Sheikh Anta Diop's To Cradle Theory to the African Worldview. And, there's also the African-centered approach to land education that you've written on, a critical review and analysis of the state, scope and direction of African-centered psychology from 2000 to 2010. You did that in a Western Journal of Black Studies. You wrote on the impossibilities of a post-racist America in the Obama era. We've just touched on that there, and in race and the Obama phenomenon. The vision of a more perfect multicultural union. You've touched on that, and you may decide to elaborate a bit more on that. You also have written a paper on an introduction to African-centered sociology, worldview, methodology, and social theory, critical sociology. Now, there may well be, Brother Karanja, a lot of people who are actually studying, sociology in mainstream education. And here in the UK, if you're studying sociology in by the mainstream curriculum, you're not likely to get an African perspective on it at all. What is the importance, would you say, of having an African-centered perspective on a discipline such as sociology?
So I think that it goes back to what I said in regards to what is the purpose of a perspective, how it's connected to where you stand in relation to what you're studying. But coming out of Africana studies, the work is really concerned with what's the purpose and function of the research that you're doing. Like, we do not have the time to study things for the sake of studying them. We need to be studying this material so that it can contribute to our liberation, contribute to the transformation of our conditions. So when I'm thinking about perspective also leads me to why am I studying what I'm studying? And as it relates to training within psychology, sociology, political science, all of those fields have all those fields are social sciences. Okay, the social sciences were developed in order to study society, and from an African-centered perspective, in order to change and make the society better. Now, Europeans just love to study stuff for the sake of studying it. So it's like, I'm going to look at this tree and tell you about the tree, but it's like, I need to know what is the function of the tree, how the tree is helping me, yada, yada, yada. So what I'm concerned with then is how and why are we studying, for what interest and what purpose? And when it comes to the work with an African-centered sociology, there's a body of Black psychologists, Black sociologists who were doing this work. Go back to W.B. Du Bois, okay, who, is the foundation for Black sociological work. His Philadelphia Negro, his, work on the suppression of the African slave trade, all of that stuff had implications beyond an academic study. Like, Du Bois's foundational role within the NAACP was about how do I move from like this scholarship to using scholarship to agitation. And that becomes important. Look at the work of Anna Julia Cooper. Moving forward, begin to look at the work of these people who are consciously developing a Black sociology, whether we're talking about folks like Robert Staples, whether we're talking about folks like Joyce Ladner. There's a whole bunch of people who are doing this work within the field of sociology who are like, we're concerned with how do we make this stuff, useful and relevant to changing the conditions of Black people. But I want to jump to psychology, because psychology, it for me is like so foundational to the liberation work. And what we don't recognize is that the very roots of psychology is connected to who we are as African people. The very etymology, and I know that your audience knows what the word etymology means because y'all were talking about it last week, so we good. But the basic etymology of the word psychology, the root psyche that we assume to be connected to the brain, to the mind, comes from the ancient Kemetic, ancient Egyptian concept known as the Saku, which is the soul. Psychology is fundamentally concerned with understanding the soul, the immaterial component that makes us who we are. And once we have an understanding of that immaterial component, then we begin to think about what happens in our thoughts, what happens in our behaviors. But if we don't get this foundation that is rooted in this African-centered approach to psychology, we can't do the work that we need to do. We sit here giving people questionnaires and all types of foolishness and coming up with, all types of quantitative numbers to understand someone's behavior when we have to understand them at their very deep immaterial self. When I teach my classes on African-centered spirituality and religion, that's how we approach this. We don't approach this from this notion of, religion. I mean, we should know that religion, the concept of religion in and of itself, is foreign to African people. The etymology of the word religion in and of itself says that it's fundamentally about reconnecting and rooting back when you look at the etymology of the word religion. And from an African-centered perspective, we've never been disconnected. We've never been separated from the creative force. The creative force is within us, so we are already connected, so we don't need to reconnect. That's some European stuff, okay? Because remember, the European coming out of the European worldview, disconnected from the environment, are trying to find their connections and trying to find their way back to the source. We ain't never left the source. The source is within us as African people. So therefore, like these understanding and connections as we move from African-centered sociology to African-centered psychology to African-centered spirituality, all of these things are extremely important, and it is fundamentally concerned with how we get free. At the end of the day, how do we change the conditions that we are in so that we can be out of the Maafa, out of this great disaster that came when non-African folks came and imposed their reality on all of us as African people?
Absolutely. That's got to be key and central, as you say, in everything that we do and try to do. It's to liberate ourselves as people and get ourselves out of this maafa. You've mentioned some names there about people who are doing great works to make the linkages or create the bridges between, the kind of scholarship and the works that we do within the community. I mean, are you able to suggest now, how we take that forward? What is that there? How can we engage, our great thinkers in the community in such a way that it does help to advance us as a people? Because as we know, quite often those among us with the great knowledge and the great skills tend to be, so overworked and so stressed by the mainstream in maintaining the status quo that they don't have time to then, be doing the real work in the community that needs to happen in order to help to free us, from the bondage that we are still in. How do we go forward on this, in your opinion, please, Dr. Karanja?
I believe that we first start by looking in the mirror, as Dr. John Henrik Clarke would say. And when you look in the mirror and you see who's looking back at you, you see your leader, you see your revolutionary, you see the one who's going to change the world and change your society, as opposed to thinking that it comes from somebody outside of you. And I think that's, Ella Baker, this is Ella Baker's month for me. Ella Baker was a influential throughout a number of movements within the United States throughout the 1900s. And, she represented a style of leadership that was not about the ego and not about the self, but just about inspiring other people. Ella Baker was essential in getting those students together who would eventually create the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. She would be influential on people that like Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture, influential on all these folks. But we don't talk about her, and we don't talk about her because she wasn't about ego. She wasn't about herself. She was about doing the work. And part of the work is to inspire other people to actually do the work. Good leaders are about creating more leaders. They're not trying to create followers. And I think that when we think about how do we do this work, we do the work by continuing to move and act in a way as which we're trying to inspire other people. I organize with the Malcolm X grassroots movement. I organize with
Oh, okay. We have just lost our guest there, but hopefully he will be right back with us. So apologies for the disconnection there. He's just dropped out. Hopefully he's not had a power outage. Wouldn't be expecting him to be having power outages in America. You would expect that to be happening where I am, though, because that's what's going on right now. So I can see some of your questions coming into the chat. Please, yeah, do keep them coming. And I will be putting your questions to our brother. I see we've got Dr. Clyde Winters in the house. Welcome, welcome, Dr. Clyde. Dr. Clyde, as you know, an Afrocentric historian in his own right. Wow, wow, wow. I was a student and one of the students on his Africana research study program. And wow, 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 what a program that is indeed. Great, great one, and I can highly recommend it. There's going to be another one starting in January. So if you missed the last one, make sure you get information about the next one that is coming up. Okay, let me see. Let me go backstage to see if our guest has managed to log back on. No, he hasn't managed to log back on just yet, but hopefully, yeah, he's trying to connect now. Hopefully, I'll be able to bring him back on. Yeah, here he is backstage. Welcome back, our brother. We lost you for a short while. I got worried. I thought I was going to have to carry the program on my own for a minute. What happened?
I have no clue. It knocked me out, but it's the issues with technology. That's why we can't trust it. I forgot where I was at, but at the end of the day, the point is that we have to be able to engage ourselves and do what the ancient Cometians, ancient Egyptians told us: knowledge of self. We have to understand who we are. And as we navigate that process of knowledge of self, we then start to manifest and become examples of the behaviors that we deem to be important. And by doing that, we then provide examples for people to follow. So, like, I try to connect and immerse myself around people who are committed to the liberation of African people, so that I'm with them and I see how they approach things. I see how they move through the world, and I use them as models for my own behavior. And my name Karanja is the name that was given to me by my parents when I was born in 1977. And Karanja is a Kikuyu um, um, name from Kenya, and it means guide, Guide. And I believe that, like, my role as an educator, my role as someone who influences people, I'm trying to guide folks, trying to guide us out of this mess that we're in. So that's my indirect way of answering the question, even though I don't even think that I did, but it is what it is.
Yes, you did, and we heard you loud and clear. We are the ones that we have got to look to save ourselves. There's no savior that's going to come down and save us. The savior is looking at us in the mirror. So go look in the mirror,
Yep.
family. You are the activist. You are the savior. You are the one who have been given the power to do what needs to be done during these times. In terms of acquiring a knowledge of self, we are on that journey. on this platform and have been for a little while. Last strong we had Brother Edison, Sister Baguette, and Brother Jammers, and my jaw was just dropping with some of the information that they were expounding, and it's all about us getting to know who we are. And they were reminding us that this body that we have is just the medium that we're using right now, so that we can function on this planet and in this environment. But the real us, is inside of this body. What does that real us look like? Well, you're going to have to watch the video Last Strong to get the details on that. But wow, blew my mind. It really did. And this is why we need to start looking at ourselves very differently, and see ourselves the way our ancestors, saw us, because then we were at our most powerfulest. Even today, these people can't recreate the pyramids like we did back then. So imagine the technology and the knowledge of science and mathematics and geometry and everything else that goes with having to, build the pyramids, and the knowledge of all of the materials. And oh my gosh. And how were we lifting those hundreds of tons of stones, back then without the technology that they have today? Shows we had a higher level of technology to be able to do that back then. So we have really, in finding out who we are, we will then be able to tap into our greatness again, will we not, family? And Dr. Karanja, we have got Dr. Clyde Winters in the house. Dr. Clyde Winters is a friend of the Sister Shanice show. He's been doing absolutely great works, bringing, that university level of knowledge and information to us as a people. He's been running some great training programs. I did his research training course, absolutely phenomenal. And he's asking a question. He's saying, great discussion. Dr. Carroll, what methods do you use to teach your students to conduct Africological research?
So, I would argue that I do not teach them specifically how to do Africological research. That's my initial response, that I don't. I teach classes that are not research method oriented. That's the first thing that I'll say. But I will also say that in the classes that I do teach and utilize very clearly the African-centered conceptual framework around worldview, epistemology, ontology, axiology, cosmology, that I ask them to apply that to help construct their interpretive frameworks for the work that they do. But I don't. But I would be, dishonest if I said that I teach specific Africological research methods. Maybe I might in the future, but for the last 5 years, my teaching at Baruch College has not given me the opportunity to do so.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And I kind of feel that it kind of encapsulates everything that you do teach, really. It's all from that Africological worldview. And, Dr. Clyde Winters, in terms of the research program that we did with him, it was very much, putting, Africans at the center of all of those works.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with his work. I know that he has publications in Journal of Black Studies. I believe also Western Journal of Black Studies. So I know his work, and that's why I answered the question how I did it. It's we all have a role to play in this work, and I don't necessarily think that we all need to be doing the same thing. Some of us need to be doing things differently, and the people who come behind us are the ones that synthesize the work. And the synthesis of the work allows for us to then move to the next level. Even my work around the African-centered research methodology is not new. It's not new. Vernon Dixon laid out this stuff in the late 60s. I only merely went back and read Vernon Dixon's work and then read everyone who he influenced in order to synthesize the work that you're familiar with and that the majority of people are familiar with. So it's just important to remember that, like, as we're moving forward, we're also going back in order to continue to push us forward. So this whole notion of that the Sankofa bird, the body is facing forward, but the head's looking back. That is connected to the research process. That is connected to how we move scholarship forward. It's how we move our people forward by recognizing that there's some stuff behind us that we need, okay? Because it allows for us to move in the world properly. Dr. Clark would ask the question, like, do we need pyramids today? Do we need these? Do we need these today? We need the skills that created them. We need the philosophy behind them. But do we need the physical beings in and of themselves? And if we don't, we spend so much time getting caught up in all these things that come out of ancient Egypt, as opposed to getting to what was the thought that allowed them to do that work. Because it's the thought that we can use to engage the foolishness that we see in front of us right now.
Absolutely, yes. We need that higher level of thought, don't we, that went into the making and the creation of it so that we could use that higher science today. We hear you on that. Unapologetic Mystic, welcome, welcome. He says the Europeans, or the depigmented, demelanated ones, don't have a soul. Okay, so that's when he was talking about, psychology and tapping into our soul. But he says these depigmented ones don't have a soul. What say you?
I would not be going that far to say that they don't have souls. Diopian follows the monogenetic thesis put forth by Sheikh Anta Diop, which says that everybody operating is, we're all Homo sapiens. And if we believe that we have souls as African people, every human being existing has a soul. Now, that don't mean that the souls are the same. So, if it's not the same, we need to deal with why that is the case. And again, that goes back to the two cradle theory. It goes back to the fact that people's immaterial selves, that is their spiritual selves, may be the same, but the manifestation is different, and the way in which people survive is going to be different. And the way that Europeans survive is by hierarchy. They survive by separation. They survive by conflict. They survive by control. And the majority of people throughout the world, not only African people, but the majority of us as non-European peoples, exist based upon relationships, based upon connections, based upon person-to-person interactions. And when you have these people populating the majority of the world, but this small minority who approach reality from some different way, and then they interact with everyone, it creates the chaos that we have right now. Only the European people are the ones who, like, I discovered this place, I'm gonna put a flag down and say that this is mine. Every other person realizes that, like, we we can't own that which is not ours. Like, this is not the land isn't ours. But that's, again, comes out of that two cradle theory mentality, because these are nomadic people who were moving from place to place, and they needed to claim land in order to survive. Like, this is the brilliance of Sheikh Anta Diop, the brilliance of his mode of analysis that helps us understand reality. When we were doing, when the United States was doing that craziness in Iraq and Afghanistan and all the other stuff, I was like, listen, I would tell my students all the time, listen, folks, this is fundamentally about control of resources. And I said, the European historically has never had resources to control. And they have used their positioning within the world in order to control the resources of the world. I said, what resources come out of Europe? Like, really? All the resources that allow for technological survival and existence come from every other place in the world. So it's only that the mentality of European peoples, well, We need to go explore, and as we go explore, we're going to conquer. Whether it's about oil, whether it's about diamonds, whether it's about, and I'm forgetting, there's I think coltan or whatever, something that's found through um something that's found within, I believe, like West Africa, East Africa, that allows for this cell phone technology. Like all this stuff is found not in Europe, because Europe is does not have the natural resources in order to survive. So their basic survival is about the control of other people's resources, and if you control people's resources, you control people, and that leads to what we have today.
Thank you so much for that. And I think the second part of Unapologetic Mystics comment kind of questions maybe the two cradle theory to some extent, you know, because you said all human beings have a soul. Are we all human? You know, is everybody on the planet human? He goes on to say that they are imitators, unlike us, who are the creators stroke originators. We are 9 ether beings and 9 ether woolly hair, while they are 5 to 6 ether beings with 5 to 6 ether straight hair, in brackets, furs. So that clearly suggests that there is a difference between us. We're not the same beings, and they will argue that they've evolved in a different way from you know, us who have been created by the earth. So, you know, I wonder if you'd want to comment on that. I mean, and then if you link that to, you know, the two cradle theory in terms of the environment, you know, impacting the character of the races as well. You know, that's today we do have genetics as well that maybe we didn't have back then, that can tell us a lot more about the DNA of these other species and what they're made up of, which is different from us or has some differences to us. So, you know, in terms of the modern developments now in this field, what say you in response to our unapologetic mystics clarification there?
So, you know, the monogenetic thesis states that all humanity begins in Africa and the east coast of Africa within the Great Lakes region. These people move and migrate into Asia, into Europe, and as they move into these places, they eventually react to the environment. Now, previous iterations of uh, Homo sapien would move within these areas. Homo erectus, Neanderthalis, as well, would move into these areas. But those other species, or however you want to refer to them, did not survive. And I do not follow the argument that, at this point, I don't follow the argument that Europeans are not Homo sapiens. There is some scholarship that I've seen that makes that suggestion. I don't necessarily follow it at this point. And so I make the argument, like I said before, that we're all humans and that people, you know, move and react to those environments. But what happens is that within, as Europeans reacted to that environment, they changed physically, um, and they also changed culturally and philosophically. And that cultural and philosophical perspective is what they have normalized as what it means to be, you know, a European person. And when we begin to talk about melanin and the pineal gland and all those other things, all that scholarship I'm familiar with. There's the body of work within the melanin studies, which tells us that Europeans have a higher chances of pineal calcification. Pineal calcification is connected to the ability to access and engage alternate forms of consciousness. So the more that your pineal gland is calcified, that is, calcium deposits grow on the pineal gland. As they begin to develop on the pineal gland, you don't have that ability to engage the immaterial the way that a healthy functioning pineal gland operates. I'm aware of that. But I also know that the research around pineal calcification is extremely dated. So, like, I don't necessarily run with that. I run with where the most recent research is at, and it is with the monogenetic theory, and it is with people's reaction to the environment physically and culturally. But I could come back and talk about melanin all day,
Yeah.
because that's some important work that needs to be engaged, and the fact that the melanin scholarship seems to have like slowed down is potentially connected to the truth that melanin scholarship is able to produce.
I think it'd be interesting to have a show that hones in on melanin. I mean, we're full of melanin. We ought to know a lot more about it because they have uh, their experts studying melanin all day long, every day. They have their seminars and conferences about melanin. So definitely something that we need
I mean,
to have an understanding of as well.
I was blown away when I learned that there are melanin conferences taking place within Europe, within Africa,
Mhm.
all throughout the world. All these people studying what melanin is and how it functions within the human organism. And I'm like, where are the African people at in regards to this? I have students who are of African origin, studying biology and whatever. And when we talk about melanin within my classes, they're like, what is this that's what's this that's going on? It's like, y'all should know this, because this is connected to who you are. Like, when you look at Frank Barr and his thesis on, like, the very melanin be the very basis of life. Okay, when the egg and the zygote come together, they develop out of this, this black dot theory. Like, all of that stuff is extremely important that we don't necessarily engage, we don't know about, and we think that this is just like, some skin color. And it's like, nah, it's much more complicated than that. So I'm, Carol in the chat said bring some genetic scholars on. I would be really interested in coming back with some other folks who know more than this, know more than I do around melanin. Like, I understand the theoretical and philosophical arguments, but there are biologists, there are chemists, there are geneticists who can really explain the function of melanin within the human organism and why it's so important. The issue, however, is that we got to find the ones who have the proper perspective, the proper orientation to this. And the sad thing is that, when our people get caught up within these institutions, all too many of them they lose the political and ideological importance for why we do what we do, as opposed to like, oh, I just want to show you this. It goes back to, again, to what I said before about, like, the importance of rooting the work within Africana studies, the importance of rooting this work within an African centered perspective. It's like we're studying this stuff to understand how it's connected to our keys to freedom. And if that's not the reason why we're doing it, then we're just wasting time.
Absolutely, we hear you on that, and I would welcome the opportunity to have a team of geneticists on the platform to share their knowledge with us, to give us some greater insights. We are being studied on a daily basis, on a number of different levels, and but we don't seem to study those who have been the result of the cause of our downfall, the cause of our destruction, the cause of us being where we are today. We're familiar with, as you've been saying, about the genocide and the destruction that they've caused across the world, and and the diseases and their desire to be in control of resources, to take over land, to wipe the original people off the land before they take it. We know their innate characteristics, and we can see what they're doing and what they continue to do. But most of us, I don't think, really see them for who they are. Do we really know who they are or what they are. We need our geneticists doing this research so that we know what we're up against. They study us because they see us as their enemy, but we don't seem to do the same level of studies. So, you know, as you say, before we can take action, it needs to be based on, you know, solid information.
So I will tell you, Marimba Ani wrote a book entitled Yurugu, um, and that book has been very influential in my thinking around the broad topics that we're covering. You know, Marimba, she was born Donna Richards. She was a student of John Henrik Clark. She taught at Hunter College, which is a part of the City University of New York, in their Africana and Latino Studies department. And she was originally trained as an anthropologist. And anthropology as an academic discipline, studies, other people, and it
Mm.
primarily studies, um, you know, people who are not studied within sociology. Because when you look at sociology and anthropology, they're both doing the same thing. It's just that there's a certain type of people who are studied within sociology, connected to industrialized societies and things of that nature. And then there's another group that you study within anthropology, which somebody labels as primitive or some other foolishness like that. However, she was trained in anthropology, and she was like, hold up, we have these Europeans studying us as primitive people. I am going to study Europe, from our position as African people rooted within an African conceptual framework. And Yurugu is an amazing text. It is just a really, really good text to help you understand the thinking, the philosophy, and the ways in which Europeans interact with other people within the world, so that we don't get caught up in being like reacting to their foolishness. Because I think ultimately times some of us are shocked when Europeans act the way they've always acted. It's like if you understood the origin, the history, and all that other stuff, you would not be surprised. And we spend too much time like being surprised that we do not do the work to move beyond the surprise. It's just so that book is really important, and I'm gonna find the citation information for you and pass it along so that the audience can try to get get that text, because she's
Excellent.
and Marimba has written a number of pieces, but this is the probably the most influential, if you ask me. The whole title of the book is Yurugu, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior. And I'm going to put it in our
Wow, I think that's a great one to do as a show in itself, actually, so that we all get that knowledge and we're all on the same page and thinking around this. V. Ado has said, "You guru" basically means incomplete spirit. He was saying before that Caucasians have a soul, uh, but they have an incomplete spirit, which makes them very animalistic in their deeds. Not a laugh. Oh no, there's no laughing matter there. We're on the receiving end of their animalistic behavior of the Addo. Who also says that no, the majority of Africans do not know who the Caucasians and all non-Africans are. Hey, we don't know. We ought to know, should we not? We're sharing the planet with them. We ought to know of those that we're sharing the planet with. And you've posted, let me see, in the private. So I'm going to uh, post that over so everyone can see that in the chat.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. So right. So as Viato states, the term Urugu comes from the Dogon cosmology, and it's connected to the how they understand the universe coming into being, and how beings within the universe developed. And there was Urugu, who was the incomplete soul, missing the other half, because the Dogam, believed, coming out of this narrative, that Amma, the creative force, created everything in balance. Again, all of this, all these arguments and all this stuff is rooted in an understanding of African reality and why an African centered perspective is so important. Because we, you know, this is just another human being. Yeah, Europeans are another human being, but we need to understand the complexity of what that means and how that impacts on who we are as African people. If we understand things coming from balance and order and connections, and these other people operate based upon issues of hierarchy and control and manipulation, you can't go to them as human to human. You need to go to them as how they present themselves and what they have historically done in order to manipulate reality to work in their interest. But yeah, Murimbani's work on Yurugu is essential to how I think about these conversations in regards to how we as African peoples engage with, people who have historically attempted to oppress us, historically attempt to destroy and control us.
And attempted to annihilate and attempt and continue to attempt to annihilate us as a people. We do need to get to know if we don't know. Brother Geb, rise up, rise up. Great to have you in the house. Brother Geb says, I think we can hypothesize why people carry a gene that predisposes them to hate Africans. How else can we explain their relentless pattern of behavior? Could it be a gene?
I
Brother
don't.
Geb,
I'm not a geneticist, so I'm not going to make the argument that it could be a gene. I follow the work of Black psychologist Bobby Wright, who wrote a short essay entitled "The Psychopathic Racial Personality," and I will put that citation in in the chat in a second. But
brilliant.
in that piece, the psychopathic racial personality, Bobby Wright makes the arguments that European peoples are psychopaths. Now, I would not go that far, but I would say that if we look at their behavior in regards to non-European people, it is reflective of the same characteristics that we connect with a psychopath. People who are unable to deal with the reality of the situation. That is, that there are other humans that exist within the universe and not just you. People who have a tendency to lie and be disingenuous, and people who tend to be manipulative, so forth and so on. I one of a former student of mine made the argument that maybe it's not about white people being individually psychopaths, but maybe that their culture is sociopathic. And I am more inclined to make that argument, because I think that when we individualize our analysis, we fail to recognize the systems and structures that are in place that allow for things to operate without the individual being there. And it goes back to the argument that I made in regards to Obama, in the sense of, like, because there's a system and structure in place that's based upon A, B, C, and D. Obama is able to step into the House, and as he steps into the House, he does the bidding based upon the system that's already set in place. So we should be concerned with the sociopathic nature of white folks as opposed to their potential psychopathic nature.
So a very interesting topic, I think, for us to go into in a lot more detail there. And we would welcome you back with the geneticists, and we'd also welcome, that conversation on the Urugus. I think they could be two interesting topics that would help us to get a bit of an understanding of those who we share the planet with. What say you in the audience? Is this a conversation that you think we need to be having on this platform? Again, bringing our, university scholars to the community so that, they can come to us on this campus here and share their knowledge with us. We need to know what we're up against, do we not? Do people not normally study those who have done them harm, and great harm, in the past? Let's see what Go Travel Abroad says. Go Travel says, I would go for that. No other people have historically, consistently been unable to coexist with 99% of the planet's inhabitants. World War I, World War II, yeah, yeah, it's all coming in. Big up IC3 Black as well, bigging up the panel, and yeah, we should bring them. We should bring them. So I think that's definitely a show for us to, or some learning that we need to be talking about doing. So the links are in the chat, family, to the Bobby Wright paper that our brother Karanja refers to, the psychopathic racial personality uh, paper. I think we all need to read that and then come back to have a bit of a discussion. And the other one, Marimba Ali's Urugu paper as well, an African-centered critique of European cultural thought and behavior. Let's read that and let's have the conversations. So let me go back to your CV. We haven't even got halfway through your CV as yet. We're just talking about some of the papers that you've been writing, and there's so many more. You talked about there being an African-centered approach to land education as well. I wonder if you could just elaborate a bit more for us on that as well. You know, there's so much that can be said about land. We've already touched on it to some extent in terms of people turning up and putting a flag on a bit of land and saying, "Oi, oi, 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 oi! Am I land this now? Anybody come round here? I'm me on it." But you know, in their language.
Yeah, so that was an article that I was co-written with a colleague of mine who's a geographer. I believe that he was a geographer. I'm pretty sure that Salvatore, yeah, was a geographer. So we took my work um, around Diop two cradle theory and his work around like geography, and we kind of merged that to think about how do you teach students about land and their relationship to land. And it goes back to the things that I was previously stating, like um, when your connection to land is based upon control, which is based upon like destruction and manipulation, when it's based upon like just totally defacing what has been given to us from the earth, your relationship and how you think about land becomes very, very different. It's okay to wipe out a forest because like we're going to build these places where people need to live, you know um so that's the very basic argument within the essay. But for me, as a person of African descent, we know that our relationship to land is very much similar to the way in which indigenous people within the Americas understand land. And that is where, like, we're here to take care of the land. All right. We're here to,
Mm,
like, have a relationship and work with the land. So we're, it's, it was because of enslaved Africans that it was a habit to change the crop during the times of enslavement, because these Europeans would have just been trying to grow the same thing every year or whatever. But because we have a understanding and a connection to the land, we're like, hold up, we know that this land needs to breathe if we want to have good produce come out of it from one year to the next. So we're gonna rotate crops and things of that nature. But again, um, the arguments on land education are fundamentally about recognizing that if you believe that you are connected to the land, if you believe that you come from the land, that means that you treat the land differently, and your relationship to the land becomes extremely important. And this does not mean that, like, we do not need technology, but we do not need technology to the expense of it leads to the destruction of the land. When you look at all these oil pipelines that are moving through parts of North America, and I'm not talking merely about the United States. I'm talking about Canada. All of this landmass. We need to be mindful that they contribute to the destruction of the land as soon as we have some spill of one nature of some nature. When we deal with the fact that people are drilling, trying to get resources that are inaccessible at this current moment, but yet and still it leads to potential, spillages that just impact folks at levels that are unbelievable. So the relationship to the land is important. It's connected to how we see, engage, and treat the land. And in doing so, that means that we need to think about our relationship to the land differently. And the final thing I'll say is that ultimately times when we hear like progressive voices around land education and being like environmentally conscious, we should be mindful that in the context of capitalism, that will always be used in the interest of someone else. So as much as we should be concerned about electronic cars and and solar cars, somebody's gonna come around and try to create a scheme in order to make the most money off of it because that's what happens under capitalism. It's not about what's good for the group. It's about what's good for the individual capitalist to extract everything from folks.
Yes, thank you for that. Agree. Our connection to the land is diametrically opposed to, those non-Africans. Our connect. We see the life in the land.
Mm-hmm.
I had a guest on a show some time back and who was talking about their connection as Africans to the land. They said, you know, their great grandparents, great grandparents were buried in the land. Their umbilical cord that was buried in the land. That's their connection to the land. The tree was built where their umbilical cord was buried, and there's a spiritual connection to the land. Even the fruits of the trees, when they suck the seeds and they spit them out, and then the seed grow, that their DNA is in the seed that then brings forth the fruit that has the cure, to enrich their body of any sickness. So the connection to the land is critical, and we can see what happens when the Urugu brings wars into areas where they live off of the land. The people have to flee, leave their land behind, where they've got all their crops, all of their resources, and everything that they've used to sustain them, and have to flee, to some barren land somewhere that these people have set up and called a concentration camp, so that they can beg for money and slowly poison the people that they have in the camp, so that they can clear the land, for their own mining purposes or what have you. So we see the cycle all the time, don't we? Let's go back to the chat, shall we? And bring in a few more of the comments. Or did you want to jump in before we do that?
I just want to, point out that, again, going back to Diop's two cradle theory, Diop points out that, if these folks were in their origin nomadic, they didn't have a healthy relationship with the land, that this is when cremation becomes essential, because you burn your ancestors and you carry them with you. Okay, it's not about putting them in the ground. And when you put them in the ground, that then is connected to the relationship to the land. So you have to respect the land. There's a whole, like, the two cradle theory has a whole bunch of answers. Okay, and it requires study for us to kind of think about what this means as how we can think and interpret the reality that we're living in. That's the only thing that I wanted to add, because I can see the chat is lighting up.
Yeah. I did read a question somewhere from Brother Greb, who was asking, here it is, please ask the Dr. Karanja, what conclusions does he have in respect of white people? Our studies amount to nothing without conclusions. So from your studies, Dr. Karanja, what are your conclusions about white people?
I'm unclear on the question, like, what will be their conclusion, or I've already given my conclusions about white people as it relates to their worldview orientation, the stuff coming out of the Northern Cradle. I wouldn't say anything new. I can say what I believe to be their conclusion, I believe that the conclusion of white people is connected to them probably wiping themselves out, but in the process wiping us out as well. That's why we can't follow their way. Their way
Mm,
leads
it's the
to destruction.
destruction.
It leads to
Yeah.
total destruction. That's
Mm-hmm.
why having and utilizing and learning about this African worldview, having and utilizing non-European orientations to reality are essential. So, like, I come from the position that African people have to understand the way in which we need to understand reality, but every other non-white person needs to have their cultural roots, like they have to have their cultural roots because that allows for them to determine their unique ways in which they can interpret reality. The issue is that, like I said before, the European is the anomaly. The majority of other people of color have an understanding that is connected in which we realize that there is a clear relationship to the land, that we realize that it's about, a community, not about the individual. All those things allow for us then to recognize that the European is the anomaly and the European is not the one to follow. But what happens is, because of their power and their need for power, they masquerade as if they are the answer. But the reality is that they are not the answer. They are very far from the answer. But we get caught up in, imitating these folks. And as we imitate them, we just destroy ourselves. So the
Mm-hmm.
purpose of an African-centered perspective, the purpose of this work, and for me, is to return us home, bring us back to the way in which we can understand reality from our own perspective and with our own interests. That's what this thing is about, for me. Why I even started the work with Diop two creative theory worldview analysis is, like, how do we center ourselves, like, an African centered perspective is fundamentally about how do we center our experiences so that we don't look like we are abnormal, because we're not abnormal. That other group is the one that's abnormal, and their
Mm-hmm.
abnormalcy is trying to pose as what's normal, but it's not. It's an anomaly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Normal, as we say quite often. Go travel abroad. Good to see your comments in the chat. You're saying here a relationship with the land is an intersubjective worldview. They are not capable of. They need objects to define their reality.
Yep. Yes.
Nice.
Totally on point. Their whole, like, literally, the term object, the etymology of the term object, the OB is to and the ject is to throw. The purpose, like the very basis of this European epistemology, is the separation, because if you can separate yourself from something, you study it, you can control it. That's why there is no interconnected relationship between them in the environment, because they've been separated from it, and because of that separation, they then control. This is also why religion is necessary, because they're trying to reconnect back to the source. They know okay, that they're disconnected, okay, and it's all in the language. It is all in the language, and we just need to, like, study it and see it for what it is, as opposed to thinking that these are just, people who lost their way.
Mm, mm. So, we're clearly connected to the source. They have a big issue with that, it seems, as they try and find their way back to the source. Wow. V. Addo says Africans are spiritually connected to the land of Africa only. All spirit of Africans go back to Africa once they die. Oh, Viado, please explain, why are we only connected to the land of Africa? Or do you mean the world or the planet? Because at one time, the entire planet was Africa, you could say. The entire planet was black. You know, we are the indigenous people of the entire globe. How do we know where our spirits go back to? I'm really intrigued to hear some more from you on that. Dr. Karanja, do you have any thoughts on that comment from our brother Viado?
I think of a song by Cassandra Wilson called Sankofa. And in that song, she speaks to the reality that we return back to our point of origin.
Oh, but how do we know? Interesting. Brother Gav, let's see. Please ask us, Karanja, what conclusions are. Oh, yeah, we've asked that one. Let me scroll down. Welcome, Ola. Ola saying, I was told that our ancestors own the land and the living are custodians, caretaker of the land. No one should sell land because that would be like prostituting the land.
Yes, yes,
Wow.
yes.
Yeah, so the dead own the land, our ancestors who are past. So the dead owns the land, and the living are the custodians of the land, and we shouldn't sell it.
Yeah, but
Wow.
we also, so I don't necessarily consider the ancestors as dead. The ancestors,
Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have said they're dead because they live
right,
in us,
they're part
don't
of
they?
us. They're connection. They're that
Yeah,
lineage. We're just
yeah,
here in the physical to
yeah.
take care of the land at the current moment. And it's just important for us to understand cycles of life and how nobody is actually dying. It's just spiritual energy transferring from one generation to the next, from one being to the next. And because we are here, okay, in this physical being, we have to do work within the physical, and part of that work within the physical is connected to land and the work that we do on the land. At all, the majority of African spiritual systems speak to this understanding of us being fundamentally immaterial beings, and we're given this physical being in order to do work on the physical plane. Whether we go to the ancient Commission's construction, we can look at the Akan, we can look at within the Ifa. All of them speak to this reality. But again, if your only way of seeing and understanding reality is material, you then don't think about this. You think about what is the material function of the land. It's like, no, there is something beyond the tree that is here. There's something beyond the grass and the dirt. Okay, and we should be concerned with what is beyond, because what is beyond is actually what connects us. Okay, the connective energy between the environment and humans means that if we destroy it, we're destroying ourselves.
Wow, yeah, what's beyond the land itself? And thank you for that, my brother. And, as you was talking about what's beyond the land itself, and you was talking about the spiritual connection between ourselves in the present and our ancestors, I was just seeing back, that there are hundreds of thousands of years of ancestors, possibly millions of years of our ancestors who had a connection to the land and are still connected to the land. And we ought to be aware of that connection and know of that connection because, we were there. We were in them before we were created, and the futures are in us yet to come, who will also have a spiritual connection to the land. And, how you talked about us actually transferring from one spiritual essence into another as well. We don't actually die. That means we are our ancestors. You can see
That's right.
there, we are the ancestors reincarnated,
Right.
having an experience today, and their DNA, or their spirit, wow, is very much alive in us. I mean, that is an Africana worldview, which is so different from the Eurocentric worldview. And, it makes a lot more sense to, our kind of psyche and our outlook on life, I think. Wow, this is really interesting knowledge that you're sharing and learning that we're developing here together. So let me quickly scroll down and see what we've got. Go Travel is the indigenous peoples phenomenological agenda complementary or competing with Africana phenomenological scholarship agenda. The phenomenological, I like saying that. Is the Indigenous Peoples Phenomenological Agenda complementary or competing with the Africana Phenomenological Scholarship Agenda?
The answer for me simply is no. If everything in the universe is interrelated and interconnected, there are relationships, and we need to understand those relationships. And I do not believe that. I don't believe so. That's my position, and it's a political position. It's an ideological position because the issue is white supremacy. And if we are producing white supremacy as people of color, then that's the problem. But if we're not, then we need to be dealing with white supremacy as opposed to dealing with fake uh, conflicts that have developed between certain groups of people who are not white.
Oh, and also very importantly, just to mention here, and thanks for that question there, Go Travel Abroad as well. No, not competing agendas because everything's interrelated. So does that go back to the balance of Ma'at? So where we are creating, there are those who are causing destruction. Are they really, complementing the planet then? But yeah, and also just touching on the whole white supremacy stuff, we don't give them that title here on this platform. We believe that words are powerful, and to suggest that one group is supreme is also suggesting that another is inferior. And so we call them white terrorists. We think that's more of an apt kind of description rather than white supremacists. White terrorists, because they've been terrorizing us for thousands of years from the day they called out the Caucasus Mountains. Things just haven't been the same. DJ Jamaican Jankra channel says the Devil's Punch Bowl in Natchez, MS, where 20,000 Africans were interned by the Union Army and died, bears the sweetest and biggest peaches there, but many people will not eat them. Any comments on that?
No, I mean it goes back to what we were talking about in regards to relationship to land and connecting to land and bodies within the land, and whether or not you want to eat the fruit off of that land. That's what that comment is really getting at. So I'm with them 100%.
And the other commonality as well is it's a genocide. So the extent to which we have been being wiped off the face of this earth, many of our people, it's very concerning when you start to think about it. But we're going to come back to that topic. We're going to look and try and understand the nature of some of these people a bit more, to see if we can get an understanding why over thousands of years they've been consistently and systematically causing genocide across so many huge parts of the world. But let's get back to some more comments in the chat. Teresa says, yes, a white body supremacy transferred onto others, as in Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands. I understand that one, but okay, well, thanks for that. Somebody, you might want to follow up on that. Go Travel, that's exactly why they dig our ancestors out of the ground to store in brick buildings and museums and call it a scientific discipline. Right, Vid Addo, 9 Ethiopians' origins in Africa and Africa only. 6 Ethiopians' origins are other continents. 9 Ethiopians are the natural custodians of the earth. Rise up for that. Viado is reminding, Jamaica Jankro is reminding Viado, the African has no friends outside of the race and few friends within. Oh my gosh, isn't that the reality of our situation. Lots of conversations now going on about 6 ether myelinated beings having straight and curly hair. Let's see what Mr. IC Breathe Back is saying. He says, how can an Africological worldview work for reparations and liberation? You joined us late, but let's recap on that. How can an Africological worldview work for reparations and liberation of Black Africa and the Black African diaspora? Great question. Our guest has touched on it, but let's go back and ask you to kindly elaborate on the practicalities of an Africana worldview.
So, that specific question, I initially want to say I haven't really thought about it. I mean, like, I've written and I'm doing some current work around reparations, but linking it directly with the worldview framework is like not right there. But I would say that the African worldview is one that is rooted in an understanding that everything within the universe is interconnected, interrelated. It is one that is rooted in the centrality of community. It is one that is rooted in the immaterial being is an important component of self, of the very foundation of self. And it is one that is rooted in recognizing that we can learn and must learn beyond the five senses, and that the spiritual world and the immaterial world can give us answers. With that being stated, when we think about the question of reparations, we're fundamentally concerned with what is the relationship between the current structures that exist today and the current conditions of folks who were forcefully taken from the continent of Africa and placed within the diaspora to work to the advancement of some nation that they're not seeing the benefits from, which means that if everything is interrelated and interconnected, it then becomes a responsibility for the people who put in the work to receive their compensation. That's the quick, simple way in which I would think about approaching the reparations argument from the worldview perspective, in that everything that the West has created was built upon the labor of new African people, but yet new Africans are the ones that are suffering um, within this current world that we live in. So that we're definitely owed something. But we got 4 minutes.
I know, and you wanted to mention the School of Pan-African Thought.
Yes. The School of Pan-African Thought has a series of courses, and I am assisting and pulling together some of the courses that are there. So I'm going to drop the website for the School of Pan-African Thought in the chat so that y'all can check them out and check out the work that we do. School of Pan-African Thought is UK based with a series of courses that are there. Just go to the website and check it out. Some of the arguments and ideas that I'm introducing today are material that will be in the Anthropology of Africa course, which I believe is going to be starting up in January. But definitely check out the work that the School of Pan-African Thought does. It's important, necessary work, especially when we're talking about how do we bring things and make them accessible to to our people, so that we can then become the change agents that we need to be, as opposed to thinking that there's just these individuals out there who are going to be the ones doing the work. We do the work. We look in the mirror and we see that leader, we see that revolutionary, we see that person who's going to make the change. We have 2 minutes left, and I am exhausted.
We have exhausted our guests. So sorry, but you have just filled our cup with so much knowledge, and I want to thank you so much for the great works that you have been doing over the decades, for the countless papers that you've written, the collaboration with other great thinkers, for sharing some of that knowledge here with us today. We certainly hope you'll be coming back to our campus, the Sister Shanice Show platform, to share with us further about our melanin. And we talked about bringing some geneticists on board, which would be, absolutely fantastic as well. There's so much more I know that you would love to share with us. And so we look forward to you being, a regular guest, a visitor on the Sister Shanice Show platform. To everyone in the audience that have been participating in the discussion, thank you so much. Let's go out with a comment from Ola that says the Africana concept of worldview is much broader than that of the European worldview. In that case, their methodological approach to science is limited because of their individualized approach. I think that is a great conclusion to today's discussion. Absolutely agree with you on that. Their worldview doesn't even link, our existence to the cosmos, which is what our ancestors did. There was that direct linkage with the planet and the environment and the way we built and who we are and our bodies and our organs and everything to the cosmos. That has largely been lost. So the Africana worldview is absolutely essential, and I agree with you on that, Ola. Thank you so much. So the Jamaican John Croft, he says, great program today. Tell him for don't be a stranger. Yeah, don't be a stranger now. We want to see you back here. Yes, please rise up our guests. Give us a thumbs up on the way out. Leave a comment underneath the video, please, family, on the way out. And all being well, please do make sure you get a copy of my book, A Black King of Anglo-Saxon England, King Offa. Read about him. Make sure your family and the young ones in your family are inspired by this book. Brother Lance, thank you so much. Sister Afri Jamal, thank you so much. See you back here same time next strong with our special guest, Mr. Patterson, who is the leader of Jamaica's third political party. Let me just check that I have actually included everything in the chat. Okay, let me just give you our brother Karanja's Twitter details so you can follow him on Twitter. If you're on to Twitter, I need to get into it more, I must admit. Here it comes. So thank you so much, Brother Karanja. As I have said, and as has been said in the chat, don't be a stranger.
I intend to come back, and I look forward to coming back and sharing. I enjoyed the discussion. I appreciate the style because the question and answer is easier for me, and to deal with ideas from the people in the chat just makes it more communal, where it's not just you and me talking, but we're talking with everyone. So I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to coming back sometime within 23 to talk about a number of topics. Thank you very much. And to everyone, good night.
Thank you very much again. Good night, Brother Karanja. Good night, family. And stay logged to the Sister Shanice Show channel. Just check out the library for loads of interesting talks and discussions. Oh, thank you for already agreeing to come back. More love, more strength, more budum to the entire family. Sister Shanice, out of here for now. Bye.